So I wanted to take a minute to talk about masks again. Um, Last week I had to go, or actually this week, Sundays when we went down there. But so we live in Georgia, and last week I had to go down to a customer site in Florida. And the difference between Georgia and Florida at this point in this pandemic, if you will, is pretty stark. So the first thing I want to do is kind of go through what happened when we went down there, and then I want to talk a little bit about the mask, the entire process, because it's still kind of crazy to me. So the first thing is we get in the car to leave Georgia, and in Georgia, people wear masks, but it's very seldom, especially where I live. There's hardly anybody that you bump into that's actually wearing a mask. So I'm not saying that people don't wear masks, but most people don't. When we left here to go to Florida, almost instantly upon getting into Florida, we noticed that everybody was wearing a mask. When we would stop at the gas station to get some food, we had to go in because they didn't have a drive-through, and literally every single person in the store was wearing a mask, and it was a pretty big place. When we eventually got down to where we were going in Florida, we couldn't eat anywhere. The only place we could go eat were in drive-through lines because everywhere else you had to have a mask. And the funny thing was what we were being told with the masks. For example, we went into an Outback restaurant, which I'm probably not ever going to eat at again. We don't really go there that often anyway because it's kind of not a very good restaurant these days. But the funny thing is, we walked in the restaurant and the restaurant was completely empty. Like the only people in this restaurant were the servers, and we asked if we could eat, and they said not without a mask. And I said, well, we don't have a mask. And she said, well, if you don't have a mask, then you can't eat here. And I said, well, could you please demonstrate for me how to eat with a mask on, because I've never seen anybody actually do it. And she thought that was not very funny, but she said you don't have to eat with the mask. You can once you sit down at the table, you can take the mask off. Where I responded, so I only have to wear a mask to walk from right here to 10 feet away where the seat is. I said, so why can't we just go sit down? There's nobody even in here. And she said, well, if you don't have a mask, you can't come in. So essentially, you wear a mask to walk to a table, but once you get to the table, you can take your mask off, eat, and do everything else. And it's also worth noting, and they can say that they do something different, but I don't see a germ crew coming in to clean the tables once you get up to go, once you're done eating. I mean, I know they clean the tables, but I haven't seen them clean the tables any better than they do any other day. So I'm not really sure what they're doing to decontaminate the area that you're sitting at when you're eating. But that's a whole nother conversation. So the point, really the big point is that Georgia as a whole, we don't wear masks nearly as much as the people in Florida do. The people in Florida, almost everybody is wearing a mask. So my first question is, given the fact that Florida is so much more strict and Georgia is more laid back, we should see a much higher death rate in Georgia than we do in Florida. But when you go look at the website for the CDC website per state, Georgia's actually a lot less than Florida. So it seems, just on that point by itself, if masks work, then why aren't we seeing a lower infection rate in the states that are mandating masks than we are in the states that are not mandating masks? And again, I'm not implying that the virus isn't real. I'm not implying that that people don't get sick and die, but they do this every day. So I'm just saying that all of this stuff that we're doing to ourselves, and be very clear, the government is not what's doing this to us. It's us doing it to us, because all we have to do is all say no, and the government can't do anything about it. So this is just, it's crazy. So anyway, so it got me thinking. It's like, okay, so it's okay for me to go in the restaurant. It's okay for me to sit down and eat, but it's not okay for me to walk to the table. It's a little odd. And then I got to thinking, it's like, well, the girl that was waiting on me, that was standing at the counter, was wearing her mask down under her nose. So then it got me thinking, well, if you're not going to wear the mask properly, then what good is it doing anyway? So why can't I walk over there with my nose hanging out if you're going to do it? So the whole, you have this whole thing about wearing a mask and wearing it properly, and those are two completely different conversations. So then I got to thinking, well, if I wear a mask all day long and I'm not infected, then it's kind of pointless, other than the fact that I've got this disgusting thing sitting on my face now that I have to take off and lay on the table. I have to put down around my neck, that's sitting here dribbling goo all over the place. If I am sick, then I have this, instead of me walking, I guess you could kind of think about it, if I had a bag of sand and I pick up a bag of sand and I walk it over and I put it down and then I walk off, well, I don't have a whole lot of sand on me when I walk off, because it was just one bag of sand. And so I walk over, I put the bag down, and I leave, and I don't really make a mess. If I'm moving sand all day long and I have sand all over me because I've got the same clothes on and the same the same attire, and I now walk away, I'm going to be dribbling sand all over the place because I've taken a bath in it all day. And to me, this is equivalent to me wearing a mask all day. If I don't have a mask on, then the experiments say that you don't really, breathing and talking, you don't, and this is all the experiments up to 2020, they've always found that you don't spread the virus, or a virus, and I think most of them looked at the flu, but you don't spread a virus just by talking. It's usually a deep cough that is what's getting that spread, or me, touching my mouth or whatever, and then touching other things. So the virus, and by the way, I saw an article, I think last night, where they're saying that where they've been testing like grocery buggies and those kind of things, and they're finding that the virus isn't really, they're not finding it on very many places. So they're starting to think that the spread isn't by us touching things, but that's a whole nother conversation. But the point is that I have now put a mask on, and I am contaminating that mask all day long, because nobody is changing these masks. And everybody likes to point out, well, the doctors wear these when they're doing surgery, so it must be good for us to do. But that's really an ignorant thing to say, because the surgeons wear masks to keep from spitting and other things and corrupting the area where they're doing surgery. So it's a mask that's meant to hold things into the mask, really large particles. They don't stop a virus. So that argument is kind of dumb, because what's happening now, and the point of it being dumb, is that when that surgeon is done with what he's doing, he takes that mask off, throws it away, and gets a new mask. People aren't doing this because we can't possibly afford to do this. So what they do instead is they get a bandana and put it on their face, and they like the way that bandana looks, so they wear that bandana every single day. So if they are contaminating the bandana, instead of them walking by me and dribbling a few pieces of the virus around, they've got this contaminated rag around their face that they're just corrupting everything that they touch. And they're constantly pulling the mask up. So now, instead of them getting a little bit of virus on their hands and pulling the mask, and just by touching themselves, now they're getting just this massive amount of virus that is all over this do-rag or whatever the heck they want to put on their face. and then corrupting everything around it. Or worse, they sit down at the table and they take that thing off and lay it down on the table. Well, now I've just got this infestation that I just laid on the table, and so the whole thing is kind of crazy. The other part of mask that drives me crazy is if you're not going to wear the mask properly, then why are you wearing the mask at all? If you're going to wear the same mask all day long, then what good are you doing? You're just corrupting everything around you. And then the cloth masks. Why are we wearing cloth masks? Because the last time I checked, I've never seen a doctor or anyone else anywhere around a hospital wearing a cloth mask. And in fact, they don't even wear masks or they didn't used to wear masks going up and down the hall. They only wore them sometimes, depending on the people that they went into the room for. And interestingly enough, if the person had an actual contagious virus, they don't even walk into the room with a mask on at all. They usually have a respirator and a full suit on. So people are like, oh, well, the doctors wear these masks, so therefore they must work. Well, but if the doctor goes into an actual room that has a patient in it that has a deadly disease, they're not wearing an N95 mask. And by the way, a cloth mask is so far separated from an N95 mask that it's not even worth talking about. So we're talking about wearing a mask to protect everybody, but what we're really doing is corrupting everybody. And that doesn't even get to the crux of my issue with the masks. So I am pretty just applying common sense. I'm not implying I'm a doctor. I'm not implying that I've gone out and done a bunch of experiments. What I'm implying is that using common sense to think about what we're actually doing, none of this stuff makes any sense. So if the government wants me to wear a mask and wants people like me to wear a mask, they need to do a better job of explaining to me why this mask works and that mask doesn't work. Because these experiments since February of this year are useless because they're proving the point. There's tons of money now in this virus. And so being able to go out and do an experiment, you get paid for this stuff. So when it's kind of like the global warming thing, once scientists figure out and the colleges figure out that they can get lots of donations and lots of money by saying that global warming is real and doing all these experiments and things to prove it, they're going to start doing that. Why would any school in its right mind say global warming is not real? Because they just cut off every bit of funding that they would have gotten to prove that it is real. So you have to use some common sense to think about the people that are actually doing these experiments and whether or not they're trustworthy. And I'm not saying that they're not all trustworthy, but I'm just saying there is a bit of bias in all of these schools and places doing these experiments. So that said, but the big problem to me is the human interaction that we're missing. And a good example is yesterday. We live I work here in a really small town, and we eat at lunch at the same place, probably half the week. And everybody's friendly, everybody's nice. You don't have problems with anybody. And just yesterday, I got in a verbal argument with an older guy that was telling me to get away from him, and he's standing there with no mask on, and he's talking and doing all this stuff, and I wasn't even paying any attention to him. But now I'm in this argument because he thinks I'm too close, and I wasn't even looking at him. I wasn't even talking, so I don't even know what his issue was. But the point is that because the media and the government has now told everybody that we have to have masks, and that if you don't wear a mask, then you're hurting the other person, and all this other bullshit that everybody likes to spit out with no thought whatsoever as to whether it makes any sense. We've got these problems between people. I am so sick of looking at people and not being able to see their face. I'm a pretty strong guy, and very little bothers me a whole lot. And I have to tell you that this environment that I'm in is complete hell. Like it is starting to affect me mentally, because I can't interact with people anymore. Every single person that walks up to me, I got to wonder, are they, do they want to shake my hand, or are they going to be weird? I mean, what's going on? I mean, we literally are treating each other like diseased animals. So instead of us being friendly towards each other and having conversations, and I mean, I'm gonna be honest, most of the people around me, we've not changed anything at all. We all still shake hands. We all still, talk to each other. We do exactly the same things we always have done. But when I go out of my immediate area, I'm faced with this diseased public that everybody looks at me as though I am a diseased animal because I'm not wearing a mask. And I look at them like they're sheep because they are wearing a mask, because they have no proof, and actually lots of proof saying the masks don't work, but they're still wearing a mask because the government tells them to. The government that we all have known our whole lives is chock full of the dumbest people on the planet. And so it's kind of frustrating that we're all falling into this. And I, from the perspective of restaurants, they all like to say, well, the CDC says that we have to do this and we have to do that. But it's not really. If all the restaurants got together and told the local government that, like, look, we can't do what you're telling us to do. We're all going out of business. Because believe it or not, if the restaurants start going out of business, like in a big wave, we're all screwed. Because restaurants make up about 30%, 30% of our entire economy, because of all the supporting farmers and everybody else that comes into working around a restaurant. This is a huge, major economic problem. And if we put these restaurants out of business just for the sake of everybody's got to wear a mask and only 50% of the people on 50% of the tables can have somebody sitting at them, you're hurting everybody. And you're doing it with no proof whatsoever. If you have proof, then please provide it. But you don't have proof. We all know these masks don't work. I mean, it doesn't even take a rocket scientist to know that a cloth mask is doing absolutely nothing for stopping this virus. And if you look at the states that mandate masks and the states that aren't, and there's no different. I mean, in fact, most of the states that aren't have a lower infection rate than the ones that do. So, and I know there's a lot of other things that go into that number, but as an example, and this is something else that's kind of a mystery to me, is you hear about this second wave of this virus. Well, so I have to sit and maybe I'm cursed with too much common sense, and it is hurting me. But I have to sit here and I say, okay, second wave. What does that mean exactly? A second wave. How do you know that there's a second wave? Because the hospitals aren't overfilled, and actually they are filled, but they're filled with sick people that didn't get operations and things when they should have. They got put on hold for 6 months, and now they're even sicker than they would have been. It hadn't got anything to do with this virus. The virus doesn't have the hospitals overwhelmed. Respirators aren't being overrun because of the virus. It's all a bunch of bullshit. And so you have all of this stuff coming out about the second wave of the virus. But how do they know this? Because they test people, okay? They test people, but I only know a few people that have been tested that had the virus or supposedly had the virus, and yet they never got sick. And one of my great aunts she's 94 and has some other health problems, and she got coronavirus, and she really hasn't had too much trouble at all with it. So. And again, I'm not saying that it hasn't killed people. What I am saying is that I believe that most of the people that have died from the flu and other things, not from this virus. But and amazingly, we're in August of 2020, and we still don't know how many people have died from the flu. So it's really kind of remarkable where we're at right now. But you can't just keep telling people all of this craziness, putting restaurants out of business because you don't want them to open up. And then the restaurants take it to a whole nother level. And some of like in Florida, I was talking, one of my customers actually owns restaurants, and they don't make people wear masks in their restaurant, but the chain restaurants like Outback and Longhorn and those guys, they do. And it just doesn't make any sense, because the CDC, to my knowledge, hasn't. In fact, they're starting to back off of a lot of the stuff that they were saying because it's all wrong. So, what is the right answer? Why are we having to wear a mask to walk to a table? And I want you to think about something else. I wear a mask to the table, but all of my silverware, all of my food, all of my plates, all of my napkins, all of the interactions, when I hand my card to get it to pay the bill, when I get my card back, all of these things, other people are touching my stuff. So even if I have a mask on, and even if they have a mask on, they're still constantly pulling their mask up and touching it, and then they touch my change. Or if you say, well, they're supposed to be wearing rubber gloves, well, they don't. And if they did, they wear the same damn rubber gloves all day. So I saw a girl at Chick-fil-A yesterday hand me my change with the most disgusting looking rubber gloves on I've ever seen. In fact, I started to say something to her because it was, even forgetting the virus, they were just downright disgusting. So, none of it makes any sense, people. It really doesn't make any sense. And so the local governments are fining the restaurants in Florida. If you don't do what they tell you to, they fine you. And we're talking, $10,000 fines in some cases. So it's not a little number. But the problem is that everybody is handling this situation as individuals. We're all going at this from an individual standpoint, when what we need to do is all get together and say no. The government, these people in the government are people, and they have absolutely no constitutional basis for doing what they're doing. None, zero. And so we are allowing them to have all this power over us because we're individuals. If I fight them, they're going to come put me in jail, or they're going to come find me. But if all the restaurants in the city said no, if you don't want to let us open up, then we're not going to open up at all. We're going to close, and you can go get your food from Walmart. We're done for the next 2 weeks. We're going to close our doors because we can't make money doing what we're doing. So we're just going to all close the doors, and we're going to let you see what it's going to be like when we all go out of business. So, and if they did that, you'd have a public uprising that you could not imagine. But instead, everybody does everything individually. Nobody does anything, and the government gets away with all their bullying. And it's really mafia tactics is what the government's doing. Do what we tell you, or you're gonna pay us a lot of money. And again, they have no law to specify that they can do this stuff. And the mandate that they put out that they claim is a law is completely unconstitutional. So if they were to actually get sued by all the restaurants, if all the restaurants got together and sued the county, they would lose because they have no constitutional basis for passing that law. So my problem with masks is they are literally killing the American freedom that we all experience, or that we used to experience. We used to be able to walk around, be happy, talk to people, do our thing, and sure, there was always a chance that we were going to get the flu. There's always a chance I'm going to die on the way in from the house. There in my car. I could die in an airplane. I could die. I measure risks every day when I go out, whether I'm going to do something or not do something. That's my prerogative. I can go jump out of an airplane if I want to and fly down with a parachute or a squirrel suit or whatever the hell I want to use. That's my prerogative. If I die, that's me. It's on me. And to have our parental government coming and trying to tell us what we can and can't do is just ridiculous. It's ridiculous that we, as adults, are letting other adults that are dumber than any of us, we're letting them tell us what we can and can't do in a country that's supposed to be free. So wake up and at least ask questions and get together with each other and fight this. Because if the virus is real and the masks work, fine. Where's the evidence? Show me one state that does it and one state that doesn't, or does and doesn't, and how are these numbers adding up, and what are we seeing? And then lastly, I'll close with this. Florida, with their second wave, most of the testing that they were doing down there is now having to be sent to Georgia because the people in Florida were misrepresenting all the numbers. So even the numbers that we're being told that have or don't have this virus, they're not real numbers. And I mean, there's time and time again, all day, every day, we got people that go to a drive-through testing facility, fill out the paperwork, leave because it's taken too long, and they're not going to sit in line. They leave, and then 2 days later they get a positive test result back. I mean, all of these little things that are happening all add up to a single phrase of bullshit. So if the government wants us to believe what they're trying to tell us, and the media wants us to believe, then they really are doing a terrible job of representing what the real threat is. Because right now, I see them as the threat.